This is the kind of power that a policeman has when he puts on his uniform and he steps into the middle of the street and holds up his hand and all the traffic stop because he has authority. If I step into the street and hold up my hand, I'm going to get run down. I don't have the authority that a policeman has. Now, that says nothing about his personal dynamic power. He might go home at night, take off his uniform, and be bossed about by his wife and may have no power at all. But exousia is a different kind of power. And Jesus said, all authority, power in the sense of authority, is given to me. And dynamic power is given to you when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. And we need to recognize the relationship of these two together. Because authority without dynamism can be a little bit pathetic. I come from England originally, and we have a queen in England, Queen Elizabeth, and she is the highest authority in the country. Parliament can discuss and debate issues, but nothing becomes law until the Queen gets out her pen and signs on the bottom of it, because she is the highest authority in the land. But although she's the highest authority, she probably doesn't have much personal dynamism. If I met her on the street, for instance, which is unlikely, and if I didn't respect her, which I do, and I said something like, "Hey, Lizzie, how are you doing?" And she turns to look at me and I go, you see. People don't do that to queens, so she might say what queens say, "Off with his head." That's what they used to say in history. I might say, "Okay, come and get it." And if she came to attack me, I hope I could beat her, because she's 86 years of age and she's a woman. Because although she has the highest authority in the land, she doesn't have much personal dynamism. That's why she has bodyguards around her, because she doesn't have it. She needs somebody else to help her. So authority without dynamism can be a bit pathetic. On the other hand, dynamism, dynamic power without authority, can be dangerous. Look at groups like Al-Qaeda, who have no constitutional authority anywhere in the world, but stacks of dynamism and causing trouble all over the world. Or Abu Sayyaf, who have no authority, but lots of dynamism if they choose to use it, which is dangerous. What we need, of course, is authority that can give the orders and dynamism that can make them happen. Now said Jesus, all authority belongs to me. I am Lord of lords, King of kings. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. I have the absolute right to tell you what to do. But if that's all you know, you're going to be pathetic and weak. So here's what you need to know. You'll receive dynamic power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. Because the power of the Holy Spirit is to enable us to implement the authority over us by Jesus Christ. Let me illustrate this. I was traveling on a bus once. It was a long journey. And up towards the front, there was a man who was evidently drunk. He was sitting by himself, and there was a couple in front of him, and he began to sort of play with the backs of their heads, and they got irritated, and they went and sat somewhere else. And then he let his hand slide through the seat and play with the knees of the people behind him, and they went and sat somewhere else. So he was left on his own, nobody in front, nobody behind, nobody beside him, and he began to sing. And he couldn't sing, he was making a noise. And people got irritated, and one or two went up and talked to the driver, and eventually the driver pulled off the road, stopped, got out of his seat, walked up the aisle, and said to this man, "You are not traveling on my bus in that condition. You are drunk. You can get off the bus here, and you can catch another bus when you're sober." And when he talked to the drunk man, he just sat there with his arms folded and looked out of the window in the opposite direction of the driver. So the driver said, "Sir, I'm talking to you. Would you get off my bus? You are drunk. You're not traveling on this bus." And the man just ignored him, looked out to the window. The driver put his hand on the man's shoulder and said, I'm saying to you, get off my bus. And the man just shrugged his shoulder, and the driver's hand limply fell off, and he kept looking out of the window, ignoring him. The rest of us were sitting wondering what's going to happen next, and nobody had the courage to help the driver. And eventually the driver went back to his seat, started the engine, drove back down the road, and the drunk man began to sing even louder. After a couple of miles, he pulled over and stopped outside a building. On top of the building were two words, police station. The driver went inside. A couple of minutes later, he came out with two big, burly policemen. They walked onto the bus and said, which is he? And the driver said, this man up here. So one of the policemen came up, the other one behind him. He said, all right, sir, you are drunk. Get off the bus. The man just folded his arms, looked out to the window. You're causing a disturbance of the peace. Get off the bus now. The man just ignored him, looked out to the window. So the policeman put his hand onto the man's shoulder. His fingers disappeared into the man's shoulder. He gave him a sharp yank, pulled him up to his feet, spun him around. The other policeman got the other side. The last we saw, he was going into the police station like this. Now the driver had the authority to say, get off my bus, but he had no dynamic power to make it happen. The policeman had both the authority and the ability to make it happen. And what Jesus was saying to his disciples at the time of his ascension, I want you to know all authority has been given to me. I have the right to tell you what to do. But at the same time, you need to understand that you cannot do this by yourself. You do not have the ability by yourself, and so you will receive dynamism. You receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you to enable you to implement what I, as Lord, tell you what to do. That's why we must never separate the lordship of Jesus Christ over our lives from the power of the Holy Spirit in our lives. If we just say, well, Jesus is my Lord, I'm trying my best to do what he says, we'll find ourselves weak and failing. But if for what he tells us to do, we say, Lord, I cannot do this, but by the Holy Spirit, you live in me and you can, I trust you. Would you enable me? Would you empower me? And you discover that the Holy Spirit begins to do things that you never thought were possible. A key verse in my life is in 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 24, which says, he who calls you is faithful and he will do it. He who calls you is faithful, he will do it. Not he who calls you is faithful, so you be faithful and do it. But the one who calls you is the one who will do it as he works in you and through you by the Holy Spirit. And there will be people here this morning, and you know in your own life there are areas in which you are defeated. There are areas in which you are weak. There are areas, maybe as a Christian, which you promised to Jesus, I will never do that again. And yet you do. There'll be those of us here this morning, and you've never yet become a Christian. We are really, really glad that you're here. Really glad you're here. Because this is not just for Christians. This is for human beings who want to be real human beings. And that's probably you. And the only way you can be a real human being as you were created to be is when you realize you need the Spirit of God to live in you in order that the Spirit of God can equip you to be what you were created to be. And that's why Jesus said to these disciples, I want you to wait here in Jerusalem. It's going to be another 10 days before the Holy Spirit will be given. I want you to wait here in Jerusalem and just wait here. Don't do anything. Don't try to be clever. Just wait and you will be empowered. And after the coming of the Holy Spirit in the book of Acts, these disciples became different men. They began to live differently and act differently. You find in Acts chapter 4, after a man had been healed at the temple, and there was a lot of fuss because this man was known to everybody, and now he was running and jumping all over the place. And the authorities brought the disciples together, asked them to explain what was going on. And I love it in Acts 4 and verse 13, where it says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Now what's happening there is this. They said, there's something about these men that is different. We don't get it. We've known these men. They've been disciples of Jesus for 3 years. They've been wandering in and out of Jerusalem over those 3 years. But there's something about them that's different. There is a courage. There is a strength. There is a power. There is a wisdom. These are unschooled, ordinary men. There's nothing special about them, just regular people. But they said, I'll tell you what they have done. They have been with Jesus. They could see that the life of Jesus was now active in them. And they were empowered to be a different kind of person. And this is the glory of the gospel. You see, the gospel is not just getting people out of hell and into heaven when they die. It's getting God out of heaven into people here and now. So that we live in relationship with God where his life is in us. We will go to heaven, of course. But here and now, living in the strength that is not our own. And so that's the first thing he talked to them about. You will receive power. And if anybody needed power, it was these men. But the second thing he talked about was purpose. This power was for a purpose. You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses. Now notice that. He doesn't say, and you will do witnessing on a Friday evening, get a group of people and go out and do some witnessing. That's good, but that isn't what he's saying there. He says you will be witnesses. Because if the Holy Spirit is living in you, you don't have a choice anymore. Your life is going to be a witness about Jesus. The question is your life going to be a good witness or a bad witness? Will it tell the truth about Jesus, or will it tell lies about Jesus? But every Christian is a witness. Let me illustrate that. I've been married to my wife Hillary for 32 years now. And when I got married, I stood in front of a congregation of people and I was asked the question, will you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I had a choice. Do I want to be a husband or do I not want to be a husband? Do I say I will or do I say no? And then all the guests have to go home. Well, I know a good thing when I see one. So I said, I will. He then asked the same question to my wife, and she said, I will. And he said, I now pronounce you man and wife. And from that moment on, 30th of August, 1980, I haven't had the choice, do I want to be a husband or not? Because I am a husband now, whether I like it or whether I don't. And I do like it, so it's okay. But I have another choice every day. Am I going to be a good husband or a bad husband? But a husband I am. And if you are a Christian this morning, Jesus Christ lives in you by the Holy Spirit. The question is, am I going to be a true witness or a poor witness? Am I going to be an exhibition of the presence of Jesus Christ in my life, in the way I go about my business, in the way I spend my money, in the way I treat my neighbors, in the way I talk to my neighbors, the way I treat my wife, the way I treat my husband, the way I treat my kids? Is my life going to tell people Jesus Christ is wonderful? Or is my life going to tell people Jesus Christ doesn't make much difference?